Welcome, everyone. This is Greg Rock, and on behalf of BPM Institute and the folks from Innovation Software Technology and Lombardi, we'd like to welcome you to today's webcast, which will be covering a truly business-friendly approach to BPM and BRM. And I have a few quick housekeeping items I'd like to mention, and then we'll quickly get underway with today's webcast. We're lucky enough to have two speakers with us today. Tom Debevoise, who is well known to a lot of our members, a leading author in the space, and also has spoken at many of our conferences and authored several books covering both BPM and business rules. And we're thrilled to have Tom back with us. And Tom will be joined by Mark Smith, who's been with Lombardi Software since 2003 and leads their solutions architecture team and has been the director of technical marketing since January of 2007. Lombardi is a very familiar name to a lot of the members of BPM Institute, and today we've teamed up to address this issue of both BPM and BRM together, and we look forward to an exciting webcast and a lot of good information sharing today. As many of you know, the Roundtable webcast series that we run is just one of the ways in which BPM Institute promotes knowledge sharing and networking amongst our members and the BPM community at large. We also provide some of these services through our website, our conference series, our training programs, our magazine, and our electronic bulletins. And you can find more details about that on bpminstitute.org's website. So today's format, we've got an interaction discussion that will take place between both Tom and Mark, and we have some goodies that were used as part of the promotion that folks will receive following today's webcast. And both Tom and Mark have been gracious enough to give us some time to answer Q&A following today's presentation. So without further delay, I'd like to get underway with today's webcast. Again, we're going to be covering a truly business-friendly approach to BPM and BRM. And in these times when folks are trying to do more with less, choosing the right technology can really help your ROI, yield deep cost savings, and also lower your total cost of ownership. And Tom and Mark are going to explain to us how these two technologies team together to create that scenario. So without any further delay, I'd like to turn things over to Tom Debevoise.
Thank you, Greg, and certainly your comments are very relevant to our presentation today. And we're not really focusing so much on how you connect BPM and decision and business rules. There's a lot of information available already. What we're really focused on today is the very item that Greg mentioned, the total cost of ownership and your return on investment for using this approach that Innovations and Lombardi has developed together. So our agenda really is going to be focused on that. What is this value proposition? What are the best benefits that you can achieve with Lombardi, Innovations, BPM, and rules-driven decisions? And really, we're going to focus in on how that value is driven through this graphical model-driven architecture for both process and decision-supported rules. And so finally, we want to really try and conclude with how we believe that the Innovation Lombardi platform is the best platform for your solutions. Let me tell you a little bit about Innovation Software Technology. The company has been around for over 10 years, is considered a leader in business rules. We're listed in the quadrant of the Forrester Wave. I'm not going to cover a whole lot of the detail about Innovations, but we are an international company. We're a member of the Bosch Group, and have been profitable since the inception. And I'd like Mark to also introduce himself and tell you a little bit about Lombardi.
Sure. Yeah, thank you, Tom. Yeah, for those of you that haven't yet heard of Lombardi, we are one of the well-known software vendors in the BPM space. We're one of the top-rated companies that provides both BPM technology and services. And we're known as a pure-play BPM vendor in that we've only focused, since the first day we opened for business, we've only focused on BPM. We don't have any sort of other businesses or legacy baggage that we bring along with us. As part of our mission, we've been laser focused on not just providing BPM solutions to our customers, but on inventing new ways to empower the business user, the non-technical user, to help them improve their business processes. And we've gotten a lot of high marks from industry experts on our innovation. We've played a major role in defining a lot of the important BPM standards, and we're pleased to have a lot of strong, successful customers and partners around the world in pretty much any industry that you can think of. So we're happy to be here today, and we look forward to talking to you about this subject.
So, Mark, that's true, of course. That business focus that you bring to empowering the users, the business analyst, and their ability to model their process and decision points is really at the core of the Lombardi innovations approach. And philosophically, we approach this with a graphical model-driven architecture. And we believe we're the best in the breed in this area of giving that power to the manager and the technologist and be able to deploy and develop the solution on a shared Eclipse platform and give the users, both IT and business, end-to-end traceability and transparency in developing the solution. But the alliance itself is providing complete support for people-oriented processes, which I believe Lombardi really is the leader in that space, plus agile update to decisions. Those decisions can be really easily controlled, and we're going to show you a little bit of the technology today by the managers. They're both these platforms have a graphical model-driven architecture so that the model reflects the business requirements, and it both provides strong support for service and process reuse across all processes. So we have a strong alignment and a very strong similar philosophy in these areas. So what is the value proposition, what we're calling a business-friendly value proposition for BPM and BRMS using an Innovations Lombardi approach? Well, as Greg mentioned in his introduction, we all know that we're experiencing a lot of financial turmoil, a lot of budget cuts, and a lot of different disruptions in business today. But what we've discovered is that just about everyone in the BPM and rules space is pretty busy. We're pretty much out there solving problems today in a very, they continue. And this, what we've discovered that there's a new value proposition that seems to be emerging from these projects and the customers that we're working with. All right, so the projects that we're working on today, right now, and we're going to discuss some of these projects at the very end of this presentation, are solving critical business problems that have to be solved rapidly, and they have to address critical financially driven results. The Skunk Works, these are not just Skunk Works project pilots that test out technology, although you might have to do that if you're selecting technology. The business benefits are really eliminating process redundancies or automating manual processes and trying to squeeze out those savings on labor cost. Right. In our projects, Innovations and Lombardi's, business users are actually actively involved in constructing and validating the models. So it's not a requirements handoff to the technology. That active involvement means that business users are actually constructing a large portion of the model, process model, and the decision models on their own. Not all of it. On the very technical side, there are things like SQL or WSDLs and SOA integration that IT has to be still strongly involved with. But business analysts or process architects are working with business stakeholders and actually developing the solutions on their own. And so those processes, of course, become tangible assets to these business users. And the business users become just as committed to the solution as IT is. And, of course, they're committed on a financial side of trying to squeeze the benefit out of the dollar. So in moreover, one of the strong thing about developing an agile solution and being able to really say, okay, is this the proper solution, is that IT is really using a lot of the playback capabilities, especially with Lombardi's playback tool, to really get validation to make certain that they've got that process right. They're also loading data for specific decision use cases and tracing them point by point throughout the decision, and that playback is really very valuable as a visualization tool. So users can see the steps, the paths, and the decision points, and each point that they encounter in developing the solution. And this has dramatically speeded up development and reduced the gap between that design, solution, and business expectations. So the problem is that if you're driving your costs down, trying to take a business process and a business decision focus, and you have really a certain amount of risk that's involved if you're going into this field, right? We all can remember that the whole role of BPM and decision support is to understand and institutionalize and improve all the components of a particular business model, right? And in our financial stressed environment, that business model has to support profitability in a declining environment. So when you digitize the process and the decision points, you can really improve the quality and reduce the cost of application development. But there's certain risk involved. If you are not using the right tools, right, you still have a technology-based solution to requirements gathering that look like the paper-oriented processes that we had, where we would sit in a room and write down use cases and do a bunch of stickies on the wall, and then technology people would go off and put this stuff into what supposedly would have this label of BPM or rules. And business wasn't really aligned. They weren't touching the technology. They weren't doing the visual model approach. So what we've discovered is that the greater the understanding and the accuracy of the model, the better the results. This is obvious. The increased accuracy comes from a direct visual shared model of the business, a model that business managers and business analysts have actually physically entered into the system. From the process side, they've entered the steps, the gateways, the sub-processes. They're playing through those to make certain they match their understanding of what the process should be. From the decision side, they're looking at those data use cases and going step by step through each of the rule flows and decision tables to make certain that the decisions that are made with their data that are connected to the process are correct, and the model is correct. So what is this graphical model-driven architecture, and why do we need this? Well, and I draw out this scenario that I encounter in actually doing the practice of rules. Part of my practice at Innovations is to actually be involved in engagements, and we hear this story quite often, and you should be familiar with it. So you need to make a correction to your application or your process, right? Someone sits down, a team of people write a functional spec, and they send it to the IT desk, and then that IT desk, that functional spec becomes a CMI document. It's sent offshore along with a test plan, with test data, and sometime later these corrections are made and the tests are done, and then you get this improved system that comes back, and there's a long lead time that goes back and forth. And we've been talking at the BPM Institute and other organizations about the benefits of using BPM and some of these technologies, but it's amazing the amount of this traditional software development lifecycle that's going on today, right? And so again and again, as we'll show in the success stories that we had towards the end of our presentation, that without a visual modeling approach, you're still in these loose tails of requirements with a use case where someone's written something out and you're still going through a software development lifecycle, and it doesn't really matter whether you're doing it with traditional programming and database development or with some of the other tools that say that they're BPM and they say that they're business rules oriented, but they really are so technical and so difficult to use that the business analysts and the business managers aren't really getting in there and with their own hands and rolling up their sleeves and providing those solutions themselves. So this, and just to get specific about the way that we approach this, I want Mark to cover a little bit about how Lombardi sees the same issue with software development lifecycle and how we can improve it with a visual modeling approach. Mark?
Right, absolutely, Tom. Yeah, just as you said, first of all, both BPM and BRM products, they offer that promise, that hope, as an alternative to the old traditional software development approaches and life cycles, because they are, at least in some parts, focusing on the business, allowing them to specify a lot more about how a particular application should behave in terms of a graphical model. But as you mentioned, we hear that a lot from our customers, and they've had a chance to look at different BPM and BRM solutions. And it's true that all BPM and BRM solutions have some amount of graphical modeling capability. They've got some tool, perhaps a Visio-like modeling tool, but that often isn't enough. That single tool to kind of help you get started isn't enough to be truly business friendly. And it sounds maybe a little bit surprising, but it's true. In most cases, that graphical front end may be just a nice front end to what is essentially the same old conventional code-based development approach and application development platforms. And let me kind of illustrate a little bit more. Here we have a picture where you can see many BPM and BRM suites. They've got the different tools, which include the tools for the business analyst to go ahead and specify a graphical process flow, a high-level model. But then all the lower-level implementation details, once you get past that first model, you have to export it to other different tools that are actually more that cater more to the developer. And to do the implementation of the rest of the application requires some form of coding, whether it's Java coding or XML or whatever. It's some amount of technical coding that starts to exclude the business. The technical skill requirements will exclude the business, and also you end up again with the high skill level requirements and the long cycle times. And this development approach tends to follow a bucket brigade approach where you're kind of forced to kind of wait for a long time before you see the end result. What's more important is that if you ever need to change the process application to meet new business needs or whatever, it's a huge challenge to know where to go and what to change. Or what impact a particular change in some part of the implementation might cause. So if I change a rule, what else needs to change? If I modify some business logic, how does that impact my UI, my rules, my workflow, my business objects? The onus is on the developers to figure that out. And again, usually the business people are excluded from this process. So it's very difficult to keep all the implementation artifacts in sync because they usually all have different representations and they're all quite technical. One last point to this too is, because there is so much code that's used to build, the actual working process application, you end up with multiple code artifacts if you have to have multiple versions of a process in production concurrently. So you spend a lot more time managing code than you do managing your business. So you have to be pretty careful. we usually ask our customers, when they're evaluating different platforms and technology approaches, you've got to watch out to see, is there a simple visual, a single approach to kind of specifying the application, or do you have lots of tools that are focused mainly on developers and very technical users, which exclude then the business from participation and collaborating? And also, there are maybe other missing elements that are really critical to have the business weigh in on how to make the process application better. If there aren't tools for analysis and optimization, then typically what you might be looking at is just an automation tool, not a business process management tool. So you have to be very careful, and also you want to make sure they have a very flexible platform that lets you make changes and roll them out easily and quickly, to keep up with the pace of your business. So there is an alternative, and at Lombardi, and I think the same is true at Innovations, if you focus on letting the model describe the entire, all the aspects of a particular process application, including the design, the implementation details, the runtime state, the performance data, then you're in a unique position where, first of all, the business is more included, and secondly, you don't have this disconnect between a particular part of the implementation over in one spot and how that relates to design or other analysis in other spots. So at Lombardi, we've taken, in our BPM product called TeamWorks, we've taken this graphical model-driven approach to the extreme. The model, the picture, is the process implementation. So it represents not only the high-level diagram of what the process steps are. We also have a graphical representation for each of the individual steps, the user interfaces, the integrations, and then routing rules and flow rules and things like that, such that that process model directly drives the execution of the process. I mean, there's no code that actually drives it. We actually take the picture and let that drive execution, and that gives us the ability to play back visually the process design and implementation, to the business constituents, to the stakeholders as it's being built. They can see a step through the process steps, and they can see how that's going to manifest itself as an end user experience. It's great for getting validation from the business that yes, this is what we want and what we expect, as well as it is just a nice way to kind of do testing and during development. But probably the most important part is if you've got the design, the implementation, and the runtime information tied back to the very same model, that gives you a unique capability to do analysis and optimization in terms of the very diagrams that the business has specified as the process implementation. We can go ahead and take performance data and runtime data and build what we call heat maps that overlay directly right on top of that process picture. So there's no guesswork as to, if something, if there's some poor performance or some exceptions or anomalies that are occurring in production, there's no guesswork as to where those actually tie back to in the actual implementation or design. We keep that linkage throughout because we have a single shared graphical model, and we can express that directly to the business people. So they're not trying to figure out, hey, this report said something's wrong, and now what do I do? Here we can link directly results to implementation and design. And Tom, I think I'll pass the control back to you because I think you have the very same approach when you're dealing with rules.
Yes. The in the innovations approach to business rules, the picture is the decision, and certainly, rules and what we're looking at is the visual rules palette for designing decisions and business rules in the innovations approach, and business users actually are able to go in and draft through drag and drop a structure of their decision and all of the steps that are involved in that. And we're not just saying this. We have numerous clients worldwide who have business analysts who are daily actively involved in defining and fine-tuning their rules that solve the problem. And just like Lombardi, in the same basic philosophy, you can play back the decision by putting in a test use case, which is very important because, of course, decisions can get fairly complex, and it's very important to physically enter those test use cases and drag and run through each of the steps. This is a very short flow rule shown. You can have any number of decision logic gateways and decision tables within a decision that's supported by visual rules. And you can take and manage the test case. Business users do that. In other approaches, such READY approaches, which are more text-based, and they use inferencing as a concept, in fact, we win a lot of projects from those legacy rules system because they are so complex. What people don't realize with some of those tools is that there's a disconnect once you've defined a text-based inferencing between the technology implementation and what the business users have come up with. And very often, business users are not able to program in these artificial language-like languages, but when they do, they have to hand that up to the technology to do a binding of your business objects into the rules and decision points within them. They're running those use cases are very complex, and it's very difficult to exactly understand how those rules were executed. So, but in the visual rules approach, you always know exactly what the steps were for executing this. So both Innovations and Lombardi makes it very easy for you to make a graphical model of your process and decision points, but it's not a toy. We at Innovations have actually implemented some very sophisticated models in using a graphic decision points within visual rules. So it addresses these decisions incorporate and what we call decision point analytics, which are an analysis of variable economic, environmental, or political factors that need to be considered in terms of doing things like credit risk rating, pricing derivatives with Black-Scholes options pricing model. We've implemented robust control, min-max optimization, Bessel processes. But there's yet another layer of benefit to doing this is that we not only are getting business and IT to work together, we also get business and quantitative analysis to work together so that they're able to understand exactly what the these graphical models are doing and attempting to achieve. And once again, you can get your any complexity, any difficult algorithm into visual rules and quickly and rapidly test it and verify that the model is working according to your baseline results and then working according to the business results that need to occur there. So what are the factors and why do we believe that the Innovations Lombardi platform is the right platform for your business decision, business-driven solutions? Number one, we both take a very strong graphical model approach. That graphical modeling, through our years of experience in this industry, really tracks the way business experts think. And we both have set out with this goal. So over the years that both of these companies have been involved in working in these particular areas, we've made many fine-tunings to these interfaces so that we know, having worked with them, what works and doesn't work in the field. So we've all set that expectation that these tools will allow business experts and business analysts to actually create the models themselves. So But even the most complex processes and decisions and algorithms can become really transparent and well documented. They can see exactly how they're supposed to work, how we arrive at a decision, how we play back through a process, and is it correct? They can validate it, and then again we can start to optimize and improve both the process and the decisions. And for a large basis, there's no programming involved. The business analysts do not need to know Java, C++, XML, and so forth. The graphical modeling, it reflects your solution. So there's a very much lower time and skill and risk involved to get your personnel up and going and developing the solution. Again, we emphasize playback and testing. All right, the business process analyst can play that process forward, see exactly what steps should be happening in terms of solving a decision. They can put their decision use cases into the tool, work through it step by step, and immediately validate that expectation to make certain that we're getting the right results. So only quality processes and rules are deployed to your production environment. That traceability is there. You know exactly what steps occurred, when, and that documentation is available. Overall, though, the best thing we can say about this visual approach is that we've got a strong cooperation between business and IT, and that because business is responsible for what they are. They understand. They're experts in their field. They're experts in what the basis for the decision is. They're experts in what their current and as is or to be process is. And I believe Mark also has some additional points on that, the entire architecture of the solution. Mark?
Right. I think it's worth noting that both Lombardi and Innovations are very well aligned and very complementary in terms of the technology that we have. Here's just a quick architecture picture that just shows that both our products, they're both using the same implementation technologies. They're both Java-based tools, which makes them very portable to any environment. We both use Eclipse for the design environment, which is also very portable. And I think the fact that we are using these complementary technologies makes it very easy for us to go ahead and marry the technologies in a single platform that can deliver the results that you need without a lot of jumping through hoops. But probably more importantly than just the technology, again, it's the philosophies that we have that are so similar that really make for the alignment and sort of this nice partnership that we have in that we both are focusing on enabling the business to do more. Of course, IT is never excluded from the result. They play the very important role of getting systems built, developed, deployed. But instead of having that big wall between business and IT, where the business is relegated to just sort of say, well, here's what I'm hoping you can give me, and then IT, taking a fair amount of going through a fair amount of effort and time to come up with a solution without really being able to involve the business until late in the game. With this visual and graphical approach, you can involve the business more throughout the entire process. So you kind of shift the boundary between business and IT so it's a little bit more in the middle instead of one-sided. And you can involve them throughout the process. So again, it's not just sort of helping the business with design, but it's getting their feedback early on in implementation so that you can avoid a lot of problems and you can make the testing effort easier, et cetera. And that not only helps your initial development effort, but it helps tremendously when you're trying to make changes and improvements and optimizations to an application that helps automate a business process. It makes you much more agile. And the total cost of ownership is much lower. The total skill levels required are lower in terms of the technical skills. It takes a lot less time. The cycle times are lower. So you cut out costs. You improve quality because you've got business participating throughout. And most importantly, perhaps, especially times like these, you're taking a huge amount of risk out of the equation. You're able to, by having this stronger degree of collaboration, you can achieve your result with a lot less effort and make sure that it's the right result, the accurate result. So let's just conclude then with a little bit of an examination of what are the business benefits that you can expect to receive if you take this approach. Maybe I can start too by just talking a little bit about some of the experiences we've had with some of our customers at Lombardi. I'll just kind of make the initial point that a platform like this does help you reduce the time it takes to implement a process application, which helps you automate things that might have been done manually before, and helps you instrument and track and manage processes that you might have done sort of manually before, or maybe where you had no visibility in the process at all. One example is NACO Materials Handling Group. You may not be familiar with their name, but you're probably very familiar with their products. They make industrial equipment, forklifts and trucks and things like that. Heister is one of their brands. But at any rate, they decided to, rather than try and purchase some software or build some software from scratch using the good old-fashioned code-based approach, they decided that they would think about some of the things that they were trying to do around their product management, their product lifecycle management, and use a BPM platform to help streamline and implement those processes. And they probably are one of the record holders for turning out a production quality automation application. They did their first application in 15 days. Now, most customers, most companies will take maybe on the order of 70 to 90 to 100 days to go ahead and turn out an application. But even those numbers are much lower than what might have been years in past using good old-fashioned code-based development. And let's talk about Dell. They've been a long-time customer, and they've kind of gotten beyond their first process. They're, as everyone knows, very process-driven, very competitive in their marketplace because they can react so quickly and kind of define the markets. For them, it's all about agility. And one of the things that they've been able to do is incorporate in their BPM-based applications the ability to make switches between their vendors and service providers, their shippers and carriers, in a matter of minutes, where that took a lot longer before they had decided to try and build an infrastructure to make those kind of business-driven decisions very quickly in their supply chain. And then finally, we can just point out that Hasbro's been a long-time customer too. And for them, it's not so much, they're a market leader as well, but they also have, because they're an international manufacturer, most of their development and manufacturing of their toys are done offshore. They've got a lot of the government regulations that they got to adhere to, and they have to do it very quickly. So when the Patriot Act came to be, they were able to go into compliance with the Patriot Act way ahead of schedule and without delaying any shipments. And again, because they've got this flexible platform that's kind of underpinning how they run their business. So having that flexibility is key, and you just don't find that kind of agility and speed with a lot of the more traditional platforms. We've been talking a little bit about productivity here, and it's not just about the development, although that's kind of an easy place to look. It really is on the business side too, which includes that upfront requirements, capture and design. The visual approach is really an improvement over the typical stacks of design documents that we're sort of accustomed to seeing in the old software development life cycles. So we can achieve productivity improvements on the upfront business work as well as development, and then certainly in the QA part too, again, because you can avoid issues by bringing them to light more quickly, more early in the process. If we wanted to drill into development just a little bit more, we might see, and these are actually numbers too that we've gotten from our own customers. These are statistics that they've collected as they've sort of tried to understand how BPM has helped them in their process improvement and development efforts. And as you can see here, there's a lot that goes into development. In fact, if you look at the version 1 of any sort of development, a lot of the effort's actually spent on just kind of getting the basic connections in place, integrations to other systems, sort of understanding what the basic flow and user interfaces are. And that's important. And BPM can help that. But where BPM really shines, and I think the same is true for the business rule development, that can really impact the improvements you make to your applications, the versions 2 and beyond, because that's where you're going to spend most of your effort. The integrations are in place after that initial deployment, but then your attention focuses on, well, how's the business performing? Are we as being as effective and efficient as we can be? And there your attention is going to focus on the logic and the business rules. And if you're using that graphical, visual-based modeling approach to define that, the business can participate more fully in that particular effort, and you can have astounding productivity improvements there, on the order of, as you can see here, like 75%. So very impressive. And Tom, maybe I'll turn it back to you, and you can talk a little bit about some of the things that you've seen with your customers.
Certainly. What Mark was covering was the real, in version 2 and beyond, your real return on the investment comes from improving that process and decision yield. And again, the decision yield idea is that organizations make thousands and thousands of small decisions every day. Who do we sell to? What discounts do we offer? Where do we ship? How do we improve the outcome of each small business result? And that's what we're really trying to model with this visual model approach. And we know that going just beyond even improving software development costs, which we have documented cases of 50 to 90% improvements in, the real result is that mindset that occurs within the organization that adopts that visual modeling approach, where the ownership moves into the minds of managers and business process experts and decision managers, and they're able to actually physically touch and control the business. The process and the decision points becomes the business. That's where you get true business agility and empowerment to make those changes in the organization that you need in order to survive this upcoming environment that we're living in. And of course, everyone expects that last statement that I have on this slide here, is that businesses with the best processes and who make the best decisions are going to win in this environment. And we are certainly seeing that with the continued market share that Innovations in Lombardi is experiencing. We're still growing. We're still adding new customers. We're still adding new projects. Those types of, and they're shown here on this bulletin board, but SunGard, SunGard uses visual rules to do their derivatives trading system. And since derivatives trading, of course, is a highly complex field and requires a lot of mathematical modeling, like I discussed earlier. They do all of that in visual rules. They experienced a 70% savings in developing their application from that. And Mobile Select had a web-based application with visual rules that they had a 66% savings in application development using this visual modeling approach. And certainly if anyone wants to get to Mark or myself, we can certainly have you talk to our customers about the type of improvements they had. But I thank you, everyone, very much for listening to our presentation today. And I'd like to throw the floor open to questions from the audience. Greg, are there any questions?
All right, great. Well, first, Tom, I'd like to thank both you and Mark for coming down and doing such a great job and covering the topic. I think the things that we're talking about in this webcast are especially timely based on a lot of the conversations that I've had, with members of the community and requests that we get. I've got a number of areas I'd like to take a few minutes to explore. I did want to just give folks a reminder that as part of the promotion for today's roundtable, folks will follow up with everybody following the webcast with access to a free white paper, as well as an offer from the folks at Innovation Software Technology to have a 30-day test trial of their business rules management. That we had talked about quite a bit in the webcast today is the fact that the graphical orientation of the tools, and because of the graphical nature of that, does that also mean that those are proprietary, or do you have the ability to exchange designs from other tools?
Yeah, so I'll answer first. This is Mark again. Certainly, the process models that we create within the Lombardi environment, they actually use a standard process modeling notation called BPMN. So in that sense, there is a standard that can help people. They'll find a very familiar notation that they can use. It means the same thing, no matter what tools you're using, and that can be exported and imported as XML. Now, there's a standard called BPDM that actually is a formal standard for exchanging models. But in fact, if you can get an XML, there's a very good chance you can exchange the models without too much trouble. So that hasn't been an issue for us. And Tom, I'll let you respond as well.
All right, and I think Tom will be back with us in just a second. But Mark, let me come back to you.
Sure.
And maybe address the following. At a high level, I think a lot of the marketing pitches sound the same across a number of different solutions and things that are out there. Could you offer some advice for the members of our community to help them differentiate how they can understand the real differences between these various offerings that are out there?
Yes, absolutely. I think that's a really good question, because you're right. It's very confusing out there. I mean, people understand that there's a lot of potential and promise that's offered by BPM and BRM vendors, but and they all kind of have the same high level of value props at a very, very high level. But the real differences often are not in what we're doing, but in how we're doing it. That's what we typically explain to our customers when they're involved in evaluations. Really get to understand how you would go ahead and use the different technologies, the platforms, the approaches, the services in order to accomplish your solution. You've got to try and compare the alternate solutions side by side, and you can typically do this in a short proof of concept. Lombardi is very happy to do those, because that's the only way you're really going to be able to truly see the level of effort, how well that maps to the skills that you have in-house, how easy is it to do development, how powerful are the visibility and analysis tools, and most importantly, how easy is it to make changes and roll them out. That's the kind of thing that you have to kind of do in a very short proof of concept in order to really appreciate. And doing these sort of side-by-side comparisons is a good way to do that.
All right, great. And Tom, you want to chime in on that one?
Sure. Yeah, absolutely. I would support that, because that idea that I think you have to, an organization has to decide what type of personnel are going to be managing their requirements, and really kind of focus in on what are the capabilities of the tools that they're going to use to create business rules, for instance, or process. Do you want business analysts doing that? Culturally, what is the organization going to provide in terms of creating the model? And then once you get to that point of actually making that decision, then, as I agree completely with Mark, look very closely at what are the skill sets required? How long does it take for you to train those personnel to actually provide that solution? So, and again and again, we find that people see a lot of complexity in a lot of different, from BPM and in business rules area, in actually implementing it. They can see that, so if they actually get hands-on and use the technology, they make a better decision.
All right, great. Well, guys, we don't have a ton of time left, but I've got a few more questions, so I guess we'll make this the lightning round. So let me switch gears on you for a second, and I'd like to spend some time just chatting about the synergies between your two organizations and how folks can leverage these tools together. And so I guess to be devil's advocate, someone might be asking, well, am I better off trying to find a solution that's got BPM and BRM bundled together from a single stack vendor, or what's the advantages of potentially going with a combined solution of Innovations and Lombardi? I'll put that for either of you.
Okay, well, I'll start. Yeah, well, I think, on the face, it might seem easier perhaps to, maybe go with a single vendor that might, like a stack vendor's BPM and BRM bundled products. But it may be easier, but it's not necessarily cheaper or better. Even if it's free, even if you already have the products because you're running on a particular stack and those products are available to you, you really need to, again, try it out, see how easy it is to use and how easy it is to make changes, and can the business become involved, because the total cost of ownership is going to be determined much more by what you're doing after you purchase the software. It's the maintenance, the opportunity costs, training, consulting, et cetera. All that has to be considered. I think where we have what we bring to the table is we've got best-of-breed products that were designed for what we do, designed for BPM and designed for business rules management. And we can run on any stack. We're independent of the stacks. Some of our customers actually use our products on top of multiple stacks, for that matter, and so they get consistency no matter what their platform is. We think that's a strength for both of our products. I don't know, Tom, if you wanted to add anything.
Yeah, I agree completely. And I think the question, again, what is the problem that you're trying to solve? From a process rules standpoint, many of our customers picked up on visual rules for its ability to implement very complex algorithms in a simple manner. So you need to ask yourself, whatever BPM rule stack you have, if you're solving, and a lot of our organizations are, solving very complex analytical solutions, are you leaving a whole lot of application development on the table because the tool set that you selected can't support that type of modeling? In other words, they're in the old style Java programming for the balance of the application.
All right, great. And so, Tom, maybe if I can come back to you and ask you to encapsulate this for our members. Could you talk a little bit about the reasons why Innovations partner with Lombardi, and also I had one specific question around, are the products actually bundled together?
Actually, well, we believe our technologies and philosophies complement themselves very well, as we've described. We also believe that our customers can benefit from the addition of this business-friendly BPM or business-friendly decision management and make their business applications perform much more powerfully and more agile. And this is, in fact, they've been asking for it. The power and value of the sum of these two applications, these two environments, is much greater than the parts by themselves. So we're already driving into a lot of areas where they work together. There's a lot of areas that Innovations visual rules approach cannot really effectively address in terms of process control, people-oriented processes, and vice versa, the same thing. I think Mark would agree that when we get into this complex decisioning, complex event control, there's a lot of areas that Innovations brings a lot of value to this entire approach.
And the products themselves aren't actually bundled together per se, but that's not really a problem because we have compatible technologies. It's really, we've got sort of an integrations installation script available that can basically set up a combined environment very, very easily by installing the Innovations product and the Lombardi products in the same runtime environment.
Yes.
All right, great, guys. Well, listen, I'm gonna wrap up with one more question here, and I think that'll pretty much take up our time today. But you know, in this environment, a lot of folks do have the kind of try before you buy mentality. And Tom, you guys have been gracious enough to give our members a 30-day test trial of your software. Could you just briefly tell folks what will they be able to do with the trial?
Yes, so you can use all of the components of the Visual Rules Enterprise platform. That includes the Visual Rules Modeler, which I showed you briefly, which allows you to enter business rules and test them. They have the execution server, which is a critical component of the Lombardi integration, which allows you to deploy those business rules as a WSDL. And then thirdly, we have the team server, which does very complex configuration management and version control. All three of these applications can be tested and evaluated with the license that we are offering.
All right, great. And Mark, where if folks are interested in taking a look at some of the Lombardi solutions, would you direct folks to Blueprint, or where's the best place for them to take a look?
Well, probably the best place would be the Lombardi.com website, because there you can see two of our products. One is Blueprint, which is that process mapping and documentation tool that would be a much better tool than, say, using Visio. And that actually does have a 30-day trial. You can just go to the Lombardi website and then follow the Blueprint links and then learn more about that. For both Blueprint and our product called TeamWorks, which is our business process management suite, both of the products there's little demonstration videos that are very short but very helpful and descriptive on our website. There's a whole resource center on our website that you can go to for more information, and then you can contact us, and we'd be happy to talk to you and give you some more customized demos if you like.
All right, fantastic. Well, Tom Debevoise with Innovation Software Technology and Mark Smith with Lombardi Software. I'd like to thank both of you guys for doing a great job today. I would also like to thank our members for giving us their time. For those of you that are located in and around the Midwest, you'll have an opportunity to come and meet Tom in person in early April. We'll be holding Brainstorm Chicago April 6 through 9. And we look forward to hosting you on upcoming roundtables and webcasts in the near future. I'd like to thank everybody for their time today, and thank you to both of you gentlemen.
Thank you.